Okay, on our last episode, we went through and we replicated movement. We were showing how you can replicate custom animations. We're using Rifle Anim Set Pro. You don't have to use Rifle Anim Set Pro. But we were showing how you could replicate animations without any RPC calls, doing it the proper way. But there were certain conditions that can occur where you'll get some very weird behavior. So I'm going to show you. Right now, his movement looks okay because of how we've dialed things in. But let's say you added your own customizations. And so let me exit out of here. It'll just hang for just a minute. Okay, so we have our blend space that we made. But let's say you took this interpolation rate and you wanted to set it. I'm gonna show you something. Set it down to 0. And you will get some strangeness when you go into reverse. Okay, so general moving around, it's definitely jerky. But when you go into reverse, you get this weird effect going on with the leg. Okay, and so what's going on there is, I'll escape out of there. So when you go into reverse, it's spitting out values that are near 180. But since you got to think of it like a circle, it can't decide between negative 180 and 180. So as you can see, when I'm holding shift and dragging across here, it's doing that glitch we're seeing. So basically, it's jumping between 180 and it's saying negative 180, positive 180, negative 180, positive 180, and it doesn't know which one to do. And you can even see this when we go into our event graph and we get under our direction. What we're going to do is do a print string. And this may show up, it may not, but we're just going to look at it real quick, see if it pops up. Sometimes it's hard to catch unless you're going through it with a log, but we'll see. Yeah, so it's very hard to tell on here, but basically it can't decide which value it wants to do. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. Okay, so in the original video, what we did here is we calculated our direction and plopped it into here. But what we want to do is say, hey, if you're getting close to that danger mark of 180, what we want to do is we want to set it to whatever it did the last frame. So if we're continuously backing up and it was 180 last frame, we want it to go ahead and be 180 the next frame if it's pretty close to 180. If it was going negative 180 last frame, we want it to stay pretty close. We want it to stay negative 180 again last frame if we're close to 180, if that makes sense. So basically it's not flip-flopping between those two values and causing our legs to go all crazy. Now, you might say, well, why do this? Because it looked just fine when our interpolation rate was high. Well, that's fine if you want to work at that rate, but if you wanted to do some custom movement or something like that, it would cause you some problems. So this is just an extra. You don't have to do it, but it's just something I wanted to cover in here anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to take what we've made here, and stuff can get kind of weird when you collapse into a function. So we're just going to go ahead and try it and see what happens. So let's just grab over here, and we're going to collapse into a function. Okay, so it definitely did some weird stuff, but we're going to call this make direction. Just like this. Double click on it. Okay, so we don't really need the velocity because if you remember, we originally got the velocity from here. So we can just go off of here and say get velocity. And then we don't need that velocity pin. So you just select over here and there. And this in was a pawn. So we'll just say in pawn. And that was the input in here. Okay. Don't worry about the errors right now. That's because we removed the pin. We're going to go ahead and fix those in just a second. Okay, so I'll organize this just a little bit so it's clear what's going on. If you go into the Event Graph tab, you can see where that error is coming from. You just click it and refresh node, and then compile, and it goes away. That was just because we had an input. That happens all the time, not a big deal. So let's go back into our function. Okay, so let's disconnect this for right now. Set it over here. And let's make this a local variable. Let's see, CalculateDirection. Okay, because we don't want to set direction yet, but we don't need we don't need this variable to be saved. So what's the difference between a local variable and a normal variable? Well, local variables get reset every time this function enters. It doesn't save the value once you exit the function because it leaves scope. So what we want to know is, once we've calculated our direction, is it near 180? And we really don't care whether it's negative 180 or positive 180. We just want to know if it's in that danger zone where it's like, okay, it's near that 180. So what we'll do is we do ABS, which is the absolute value. So it's saying whether it removes whether it's negative or whether it's positive. It just wants to know the value as it is. So it'll strip off anything like that. And we want to know if it's nearly equal, since floats aren't exact. If it's nearly equal, our backwards direction, which is 180. See, if we didn't do ABS, we'd have to say, was it close to negative 180 or was it close to 180? And we don't want to mess with that. It's just more efficient to have one node in here. And our error tolerance is 1. So for 179.1 or whatever, this is going to kick off, and this is going to do things. So we shouldn't have any little magic numbers here. The professional way to do this would be to promote it to a variable, and we do want this value to always be here. We want it to be, we'll call it the backward direction, because remember, our direction is being saved as a float between a value of negative 180 and 180. So float, this number does represent our direction, so this name would be appropriate. So basically, if we're nearly equal, we want to do something. So we're going to make a branch. Now, if you hold B as in boy and left click, you'll get a branch, or you can right click, type in here branch, and that'll come up. So connect our executable line right here, and we want to say, okay, if we're nearly equal 180, we want to do something. That'll be true. But if it doesn't equal 180, we don't want to do anything. So what were we doing before? We were simply calculating our direction. So you can pull off this pin here and just go right into direction, and that's exactly what we had been doing before. Okay? Because we've checked, are we near 180? Nah, we're going forward, we're going left, we're going right. We're not going backwards at all. So we don't care. We want things to remain as they were. But in the event that you are close to 180, we want to do something. And what we need to do is we need to compare our old movement direction with our new movement direction. So we need to have a variable called old movement direction. So what we want to do over here is, since we're in our variables, and you can see there's our local variable, they sorted out for us right here. We can do a new variable. Let's just do that so it's not confusing. And apparently I need to sign into Google Drive. And let's say old movement direction. It defaults as a bool. We don't want that. We want it to go ahead and be a float. So we click over here. We get there. Okay. So this is a common thing to do. We're going to drag it out. Set. Comparing one. So since animations fire off every frame, this function will get called every frame. So it potentially can be expensive, but regardless of that, we want to compare the last frame with the new frame. So to do that, we need to save our direction into old movement direction. But we don't want to save it anywhere in the meat of the function, because otherwise when we come back through here, we're fiddling with it. Basically, we just want to save it after this has been run. So we're going to make a sequence. And the sequence is very much how you would think it would be. It runs the then 0, because we started 0, and then goes to 1. So it runs all this crap first, and regardless if you hit a true, a false, regardless of what happens over here, this always happens. And that's why I like using secret nodes for this, because let's say you tried to hook it up somewhere over here and something gets disconnected or modified or changed, or you want to manipulate how it is, you might forget to connect this pin. So this kind of future-proofs you a little bit for any modifications that you might do. Okay, so we have that going on. Now let's actually use this. So we had to work a little bit backwards, and it'll make a lot more sense. If that's a little confusing, don't get frustrated. It'll make a lot more sense as we go on. So let's use our old movement direction. Okay, so we're saying, just say this is old movement direction is value last frame. So if the last frame value was less than 0, and since we came out of here true, we knew we're near 180. So think about this. If it's less than 0, that means we're going to make another branch here. Hold B, come up, pop it into here. That we were actually close to negative 180. So if we take our backwards direction, get it, and we need to make it a negative. So the best way to do that, so we're not making tons and tons and tons of variables, is just, let's do a float. Float by float. You can tell the difference in colors. That's an integer. We don't want to do that right now. We just want to do this, -1. So so this is our backwards direction, which is 180. We times it by -1. We get -180. And if we take direction, we pop it into here. We set it. And bam. So now what this is doing is saying, hey, last time we were less than 0 and we were close to 180. So that means we were at about 180 or -180. So let's go ahead and keep our direction at 180. Let's not, or -180. Let's not go positive. Now, if last frame, our old movement direction, was not less than 0, then that means we were in the positives, and we need to set our backward direction, or get our backward direction. We need to set our direction to the positive 180 value. And when you have this all mapped out on your screen, if you've been following along, you can kind of go through these nodes. I do this all the time. Like I'll go through stuff that I've done before just to kind of get the logic worked out in my head, because sometimes watching somebody is a lot more confusing than actually doing it yourself. So let's compile and save, and we're going to play it, and we're probably going to find some mistakes. It's just how things go when you're messing with this logic that can get kind of weird. Okay, now as you can see, we have no issues backing up anymore. Okay, so we can dial down that interpolation rate as low as we want, and it doesn't have near as much trouble. There is still, if I really click on these WASD keys and go crazy, well, it's still not too bad. They'll flip out sometimes, but for the most part, it's much better like this than how it was before. So I'll escape out of here, and just to make sure that our values from our blend space maintained, I'm going to double check that, because that worked out even better than I thought it would. So let's go over here to our default rifle movement. Yeah, the interpolation speed is still at 0, and it looks great. Let's go back up to what we had, 2.7. So now it should look even better. And once again, I'm no animation expert. My stuff will come in much more into gameplay, like game mode stuff. That's much more what I do. But anyway, look at that. And this is even with my sound card interrupting and giving it some issues. It's pretty smooth. Not perfect, not absolutely perfect. I'm sure there's some animation folks in here that are losing their mind. Like, what is this guy doing? But it's replicating. It's not going crazy. The legs aren't doing the wacky whack thing that it was doing before. So that's where we're going to leave it on this video. Next video, I'm going to show you how you would present this in the event that you had to turn this work into somebody. So we'll cover that in the next video. I'll see you guys next time.